I give the call to the member for Bowman.
Well, the seniors health card is a very, very vital piece of government entitlement that are enjoyed by self-funded retirees around the country. But, Deputy Speaker, many would realise that that hasn't been indexed since 2001. Of course, it was a creature of the 1990s, and it appropriately recognised that self-funded retirees who have planned for the future and planned for their retirement still deserve some consideration for government and access to the wonderful PBS, access to the safety net, access, where negotiated with the doctor, to bulk billing services, and that's precisely what many seniors value above all from government. Of course, since 2001, those thresholds haven't changed, and we know that individuals hitting the $50,000 income mark and couples hitting the $80,000 income mark that hasn't moved have been caught by bracket creep and now longer eligible for those cards. But really, hasn't the opposition today exposed themselves for what they have been over the last 6 years in government? And that is regarding self-funded retirees not as the core of this nation who have planned all their life to be self-sufficient, but they've identified this group, the Labor Party, has exposed their views that this group are enemies of the state, that this group are earning way too much money to be deserving of anything, and that this group, for finding themselves in a position where they might be earning what I think is a very, very median sum of money, between $50,000 and $80,000 a year, and are just too pernickety and too tight to even consider that they would allow a seniors healthcare card to these great Australians. Look, I say thank you to them, and I think that most Australians would take a similar view, that for someone earning around $50,000 a year, it's thoroughly reasonable that there is some help at the times where they may need healthcare, where they're facing a large out-of-pocket cost, or where they may want access to a safety net. And let's be honest, this isn't saying that people are getting a free ride. It's saying that they have access to a safety net where health expenses are really high in one particular year. I think we should be proud that we have a system that offers a safety net, and I have no problem with a couple who are seniors of age retirement over the age of 65 having access to a safety net. And to deny those families access to a safety net, I think puts the Labor Party in a very bad light. But it really only took till today, when we heard the Shadow Minister, to hear her aggressive attitude and her condescending attitude to these Australians. Millions of them. They don't collect a pension. No, they do their best with their earnings that they've accrued over their lifetime. They're living often on very small superannuation accounts, but we know that their adjusted taxable income, when you consider both forms of income, net losses through investments, when you consider foreign sources of income that haven't been taxed overseas, and other forms of superannuation which have now been exempted since 2007, when you consider that adjusted income, should be eligible between $50,000 and $80,000 if they're a single or a couple, and that should move with inflation. Deputy Speaker, this is not a big ask. I mean, surely since 2001, after 7 or 8 years of indexation, it's right that we go back to this important cohort and say the least you deserve is that your eligibility keeps up with inflation. We haven't gone to the Labor Party asking for any great favours. We've just asked for this group to be respected with the CPI indexation that we assign, that we provide, and that I think most groups would demand, and that is simple indexation, keeping up with the costs of living. I don't think this is a terribly large decision for most people who aren't directly involved, but for the 30,000 Australians over the next 4 years who were to lose those cards, this would have been a major hit to their budget. And I say again, they are people who have planned ahead for their finances and predominantly look after themselves. They pay full tote everywhere they go. And then to say to them that they can't even access a Medicare safety net, I think is disappointing. More so if they have a fluctuation in their income 1 year here or there, purely due to nothing other than CPI correction, to be denied this card. I think it was a very small piece of generosity. And it's a great shame, Deputy Speaker, that something as modest as this, for people who look after themselves and have done so all their lives, would be denied by the Labor Party. Of all the things we've discussed in this chamber over the last 6 months, I would have thought this one they could have waved through. They could have just looked self-funded retirees in the eye, and the member for Ryan would have a similar view. We have thousands of these people who do it tough, who don't have an automatic government wage coming into their account every fortnight. They often have households where there's significant rent and interest repayments which they meet, and to deny them access to a safety net is something, if I was a member of the Labor Party, I'd be a little embarrassed about. I'd be a little I'd be hoping that this debate would terminate quickly and that we'd moved on, because it's a shabby position to take. Now, what's driven that decision? The first one could be that this is a Labor Party that, devoid of any ideas or even a willingness to articulate them, is just going to negate everything in this chamber. Well, that debases the process of the parliament. But the second one, and more concerning one, is that we have a Labor Party so tied up with its union mates and so tied up about professing that they care for the poor when they did very little for them in government, that they deny such an important group. The people who say, no, we won't lead 2 decades of our life if we can avoid it on the government purse, we're going to try and do it alone. We're going to try and set up our superannuation so that we're independent. We would like to do a little bit of travel here and there with our savings. And another important development is that now, instead of having it cut off after a handful of weeks, our self-funded retirees can go overseas for a little longer without losing access to their bulk billing doctor or access to a PBS concessional arrangement of $6.80, or finally be able to get a safety net in a year where there's precipitous health costs. Look, I've made my point. On behalf of self-funded retirees out there, it's true the Coalition will look after you at every turn, but never was it so exposed. Never was the light shone upon the Labor Party's negative approach to self-funded retirees as in this very, very modest and humble debate about a relatively small amount of money that looks after 30,000 Australians. Every one of them listening today will now know where Labor stands on this issue.
I thank the member for Bowman.